What if the genius of a young black man could shatter the elitism of one of the most prestigious universities in the world? Marcus Johnson, self-taught from the streets of Newark, walks into Princeton University and challenges everything. In this black-voiced dramatic stories, watch as his brilliance goes head-to-head with the most prejudiced professor on campus. Can talent break through the barriers of systemic bias? Subscribe now, like, and comment to join the revolution of untold stories. Part 2. The rising tension. Marcus Johnson was unlike any other student at Princeton. He wasn't raised in a family with a legacy of academia, nor was he given the privileges that came with a prestigious education. His journey began in the impoverished streets of Newark, where life was filled with struggle and adversity. From a young age, Marcus had to teach himself everything. The only companions he had were the discarded books from public libraries, torn apart, but still full of knowledge. He never had the chance to attend formal school, but believed that everything could be learned if one knew where to search and had the grit to keep pushing. Theoretical physics, a subject that most people would consider beyond their reach, became his passion. Everything he knew, he learned from the pages of abandoned books and scientific articles he found in dumpsters behind old bookstores. The day Marcus walked into Dr. Richard Coleman's physics class at Princeton, everything changed. It wasn't just an outsider stepping into an elite space. This was a battle between raw talent and institutional prejudice. Marcus didn't just walk into this class with confidence. He carried with him the hope of all the kids back home in Newark, kids who would never be given the chance to attend an Ivy League school. For them, Marcus was their only shot at seeing that dreams could come true despite all the odds. Dr. Richard Coleman, a renowned theoretical physicist, immediately noticed the difference in Marcus. He couldn't fathom that someone with no formal education, no academic credentials, could be here in this advanced class. "You're one of those minority quota students, aren't you?" Coleman sneered, his voice dripping with disbelief. Marcus looked him straight in the eye, his gaze cool but filled with quiet determination. "I'm your student, and I'm here to show you I can do what others think is impossible." There was no arrogance in his voice, only the belief that he belonged here, in this class, just as much as anyone else. Dr. Coleman, unwilling to accept that a young black man without a proper education could outshine his expectations, decided to test Marcus. He presented a complex quantum physics problem, one so intricate that even his best students could hardly approach it. He was sure that this would be the moment Marcus would falter. "Solve this in 20 minutes if you can," Coleman mocked, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. Oddly, Marcus remained calm. He walked to the blackboard, his focus unwavering as he stared at the formulas and numbers others would have been intimidated by. What Coleman didn't know was that Marcus had read every one of his publications. He had studied them, not just to memorize, but to understand, to grasp the very essence of the theories. And now, with the knowledge he had gained on his own, Marcus had developed a simplified approach, a new way of solving the problem. After 20 minutes of quiet concentration, Marcus turned around and wrote the final answer on the board. The class sat in stunned silence. Dr. Coleman was frozen, unable to believe what he had just witnessed. How did you do that?" he stammered, his voice full of disbelief. "It's simple, Professor. This is how I understand it," Marcus replied, his tone calm and collected, as if solving the problem was the most natural thing in the world. His answer was not just a solution. It was a challenge to the very notion of elitism and academia's narrow view of who could succeed. But Coleman couldn't accept it. He was humiliated, and he needed to prove that Marcus was nothing more than a fraud. He invited Marcus to his office, determined to break him down. "You didn't come by this knowledge honestly. How could someone with your background know this much?" Coleman demanded, his voice thick with contempt. Marcus didn't flinch. "I taught myself," he said simply, frustrated and eager to find a way. To dismiss Marcus once and for all, Coleman assigned him an impossible task: write a 10-page essay on superstring theory, due by Friday, expecting Marcus to fail miserably. "We'll see if your self-taught genius can handle this," Coleman said with a sneer. Marcus didn't flinch. "I'll have it by Thursday." In the days that followed, Marcus did what no one expected. Not only did he complete the 10-page essay, but he also uncovered something far more damaging than any academic challenge. He discovered that Dr. Coleman had been plagiarizing a deceased professor's work. Through Min, Coleman's own research assistant, Marcus learned that the theory Coleman had presented as his own was actually stolen from Professor Thompson, a brilliant mind who had died years before. And not only had Coleman stolen it, but he had also misrepresented the findings, leaving critical flaws in his own version. With this explosive revelation in hand, Marcus not only delivered a brilliant 25-page essay on superstring theory, but also presented a damning comparative analysis of Coleman's plagiarized work. The essay was not just a show of brilliance, it was a weapon of justice. Marcus was no longer just fighting for his place in the academic world. He was fighting for the integrity of science and the recognition of talent that had been ignored for far too long. In a tense academic meeting, Marcus presented his work. His essay was exceptional, demonstrating not only his deep understanding of theoretical physics but also his ability to critically analyze and innovate. He didn't just show his brilliance, he exposed the flaws in Coleman's work and proved that Coleman had taken the theories of a dead man and claimed them as his own. The evidence was irrefutable, and the room was stunned. Min, the research assistant, corroborated everything Marcus had said, and several students, who had long been ignored or marginalized by Coleman, stepped forward to testify. The result was inevitable. Coleman was suspended, and a formal investigation was launched into his misconduct. Marcus was not only accepted into the program with a full scholarship, but was also hailed as a symbol of change. As the dust settled, Marcus's victory was clear. It wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a victory for all those who had been told they didn't belong, that they couldn't succeed because of where they came from or what they looked like. Marcus's victory was proof that merit, integrity, and talent would always prevail, no matter the systems set up to suppress them. With his appointment as a 19-year-old assistant professor at Princeton, Marcus stood at the front of a classroom, once dominated by prejudice. His message was clear. The doors of academia were not locked to those from disadvantaged backgrounds. They just needed someone to open them. And Marcus had done just that. Part 3. The perspective of Min. The silent witness. Min had always stood quietly in the shadows of Dr. Richard Coleman's office, observing, but never quite participating. As his research assistant, she had been entrusted with the task of assisting in his groundbreaking work, the kind of work that earned him accolades and respect in the world of theoretical physics. On the surface, everything about Dr. Coleman was impeccable. His theories were respected, his reputation unchallenged, and his lectures always packed with eager minds hungry for knowledge. To the world, he was a genius, a towering figure in his field, but Min knew better. She had seen behind the curtain, and it was that knowledge hidden deep within the confines of her conscience that gnawed at her every day. She had never been the type to confront injustice. Raised in a culture where respect for authority and maintaining appearances were paramount, Min had always kept her head down, focused solely on her work. She had been a model assistant, quiet, diligent, and eager to learn. But over time, as she observed Dr. Coleman's actions, something began to shift inside her. She began to notice inconsistencies, small details that didn't add up, articles that seemed eerily similar to those written by other researchers, theories that bore striking resemblances to the work of scholars who had passed away. The more Min delved into Dr. Coleman's research, the clearer it became. Coleman was not the man he appeared to be. It wasn't just that his work was plagiarized. It was the casual arrogance with which he dismissed others, the way he manipulated the academic system to maintain his standing. And worst of all, it was the way he disregarded the potential of students like Marcus Johnson, the young black man, who had walked into their class self-taught and determined, was the very embodiment of the talent Coleman had failed to see. When Marcus solved the quantum physics problem in class, Min watched as Dr. Coleman's reaction shifted from disbelief to anger. It was not just that Marcus had solved the problem in record time. It was that he had exposed Coleman's own insecurities. Min could see it in his eyes, the way his pride began to fracture. Marcus was everything that Dr. Coleman had dismissed. And yet here he was, doing something that Coleman himself couldn't. It was a direct challenge to the professor's authority, and Min could feel the tension in the room like a storm waiting to break. As the days passed, Min couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. She was an unwilling accomplice in Dr. Coleman's web of deceit. Her role as his research assistant, which once seemed like an opportunity to advance her career, now felt like a cage. The more she worked with him, the more complicit she became in his lies. She had always admired him from afar, but admiration began to morph into guilt. She had seen what he did to students who were less fortunate, the way he belittled them for not having the right background, the way he used his status to maintain control. And now Marcus, a self-taught prodigy, was the catalyst that made everything come crashing down. Min wasn't sure when the tipping point came, but there was one evening, as she sat in her small office, poring over research papers, that everything crystallized. She had been looking through one of Dr. Coleman's latest articles when she stumbled upon a footnote that sent a chill down her spine. It referenced the work of Professor Thompson, a deceased physicist whose theories had been foundational to much of what was now considered Coleman's research. Min had always been suspicious of Coleman's sudden prominence in the field, but seeing the clear evidence of theft, the blatant plagiarism of a man who had passed away, was the moment she realized that she couldn't stay silent anymore. Marcus was the key. He was the one person who could expose Coleman for who he truly was. Min had to make a choice. For the first time in her life, she had to step out of the shadows and do something that felt right, even if it meant betraying the very man she had once looked up to. It was a terrifying thought, but she knew it had to be done. She could not sit idly by while Coleman continued to destroy the lives of talented students like Marcus. She couldn't let him continue to manipulate the system and stifle brilliance. The pies. Decision to help Marcus wasn't an easy one. It meant going against everything she had known, challenging the very system that had given her a place in the academic world. But in her heart, Min knew it was the right thing to do. She reached out to Marcus, giving him the crucial information he needed, the evidence that could bring Coleman's reign to an end. She knew the risk. Coleman was a powerful figure, and he would not go down without a fight. But she also knew that Marcus, with his incredible intellect and his unwavering sense of justice, was the only one who could bring the truth to light. When Marcus approached her, asking for her help, Min felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It was as though the burden she had carried for so long, being complicit in Coleman's lies, had finally found a way to release. She had a role to play in this fight, and it was no longer about her own career or her fear of upsetting the system. It was about doing what was right, even if it meant everything she had worked for was on the line. Marcus's courage became hers. As she watched him present his essay, expose the truth and dismantle Coleman's empire, Min felt a sense of liberation. It was not just Marcus's victory, it was hers too. She had helped bring down a man who had manipulated the system to his advantage, and in doing so, she had helped make way for the next generation of students who deserved a fair chance. In the end, Min was not just a passive observer in Marcus's story. She was an active participant in the change that was sweeping through the institution. As the academic world shook from the revelations, Min's quiet resolve had made all the difference. She had chosen to be part of the revolution that Marcus had started, and in doing so, she had found her own path toward redemption. Marcus's victory wasn't just a triumph of intellect. It was a triumph of courage, of doing what was right, even when the world seemed to be stacked against you. And for Min, it was a reminder that sometimes the quietest voices could make the loudest impact. Part 4. The Climax and the Ultimate Challenge. The hours leading up to the committee meeting felt like a fever dream for Marcus. His mind raced. He had written his essay, 25 pages of brilliant, groundbreaking work. He had uncovered Dr. Coleman's plagiarism, the crucial piece of evidence that could bring down a towering figure in the field of theoretical physics. His journey from the neglected streets of Newark to the hallowed halls of Princeton had been long and arduous. But now it was all coming to a head. Marcus was on the brink of not just changing his own life, but altering the future of academia itself. A deadly quiet before the storm. It was the morning of the academic committee meeting. The sunlight streamed through the windows of Marcus's small dorm room, casting long shadows across the walls. He sat at his desk, staring at the pages in front of him, the 25 pages that were about to become the battlefield. The world outside felt distant, quiet, almost serene. Yet inside him, a storm was brewing, a tumultuous mixture of excitement, fear, and anticipation. His palms were sweaty, his heart racing in his chest. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, but now that it was finally here, he wondered if he was truly ready. Min's voice echoed in his mind. "You don't just fight for yourself, Marcus. You're fighting for every student who's ever been dismissed, underestimated, and ignored. This is bigger than you." Her words were meant to reassure him, to give him strength, but they only made him feel the weight of the responsibility pressing down on him. How could he stand before the committee, before the very institution that had rejected him, and expose Dr. Coleman's wrongdoing without shattering everything he had fought for? Marcus felt a tightness in his chest as he thought about his mother. He hadn't told her everything. He hadn't told her about the emails, the late nights, the stress that had gnawed at him for weeks. He didn't want her to worry. She had always been his rock, the one person who had believed in him when no one else did. He wanted to make her proud, to show her that everything she had sacrificed for him, every struggle she had endured, was worth it. But now, as the day of reckoning loomed, Marcus was faced with the terrifying realization that this battle might cost him everything. The gathering storm as he stood before the academic committee, the weight of the moment crashed over him. The committee room was vast, its high ceilings and imposing walls serving as a reminder of the power that resided here. The members of the committee, a mix of older, more experienced professors and younger, ambitious ones, sat before him with their stern faces. They had all heard of him by now, the self-taught prodigy who had somehow earned a spot at Princeton despite his lack of formal education. Some were skeptical, others curious, but none were prepared for the storm that Marcus was about to unleash. Dr. Coleman sat at the far end of the table, his eyes cold, his posture rigid. He had no idea what Marcus was truly capable of. He still thought of him as a mere intruder, someone who had managed to worm his way into an institution that wasn't made for people like him. His smug expression faltered slightly as Marcus placed the 25 pages of his essay in front of the committee. It was a calculated move, a signal that Marcus was not here to back down. This wasn't a submission. It was a declaration. "I'm here to expose the truth," Marcus said, his voice steady but laced with a quiet intensity. "I'm not here just for myself, but for every student who has ever been made to feel inferior, unworthy of their place in the academic world." The room fell silent. The clash of titans. Dr. Coleman's face turned pale as he listened. His eyes flickered with a mixture of disbelief and anger. He had always prided himself on his ability to control the narrative, to manipulate the academic world in his favor. But now, here was Marcus, a young black man from Newark, taking control of the narrative in a way that Coleman never could have anticipated. "You think you can just waltz in here and accuse me of theft?" Coleman sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You who have no real education, no real qualifications, what could you possibly know about physics, about research, about integrity?" Marcus didn't flinch. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was clear. This was it. This was the moment where everything he had worked for would either be validated or destroyed. "I know enough to know that what you did was wrong," Marcus said, his voice rising with conviction. "I know enough to see the flaws in your work, the theories you stole from Professor Thompson, and I know enough to prove that your rise in this field has been built on lies." Coleman's jaw clenched, and for a moment, it seemed like the room would implode. He was trapped. The evidence was there, irrefutable. Marcus had laid it all out. A detailed comparative analysis of Coleman's research and Thompson's original work side by side. He had shown the inconsistencies, the intentional omissions, the subtle theft that had gone unnoticed by everyone, except those with the courage to look closely. Dr. Coleman tried to maintain his composure, but it was clear that his facade was crumbling. "You're nothing but a liar, Marcus," he spat. "You're trying to bring me down because you can't accept that I've done more for this field than you ever will. You're just a boy from the streets with no right to be here. You're just here because of your color, because they needed to fill a quota." The words stung, but Marcus had heard them before. He had heard them from every teacher who doubted him, every academic who told him he wasn't good enough. The difference now was that he didn't need to prove anything to them. He didn't need to prove anything to Dr. Coleman. He had already proven everything he needed to prove to himself. "I'm here because I earned my place," Marcus said, his voice quiet but firm. "And I'm here to make sure that no one else is ever made to feel like they don't belong." The ultimate choices. The committee deliberated in the next room. Marcus sat in silence, waiting. His heart was heavy with anticipation. He knew that the decision they made could change everything, not just for him, but for the future of academic institutions. This wasn't just about him exposing a plagiarist. It was about breaking down the walls of systemic racism, about giving voice to the voiceless, about making sure that the next generation of students wouldn't have to fight the battles he had fought. His mind wandered back to Newark, to his mother's small apartment, to the days when he had dreamed of something bigger, but the dreams had always seemed out of reach, locked behind the gates of privilege. Now, for the first time, he realized that he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for every person who had ever been told that their dreams didn't matter. And that was the choice Marcus had to make. Would he back down, letting the weight of the system crush him? Or would he stand firm, knowing that what he was doing could cost him everything? His future, his career, his place at Princeton. The minutes ticked by, each one stretching into eternity. The silence was deafening. Then, the door opened. The committee had made their decision. The resolution, the decision was swift. Marcus's evidence had been undeniable. Dr. Coleman was suspended, and an official investigation was launched into his actions. His career, built on lies and manipulation, came crashing down in an instant. But for Marcus, the victory was bittersweet. He had won the battle, but he knew that the war was far from over. The fight for equity, for true change, had only just begun. And as he stood before the committee, hearing them declare that he was not just accepted into the program but offered a full scholarship, he knew that his journey was far from over. This was his moment, not just as a student, but as a symbol of something much larger. The walls of the academy had cracked, and now it was time to rebuild them brick by brick so that others, those who had been left behind, could have a place to stand. Part 5. The conclusion and the lesson. The dust settled quietly in the aftermath of Marcus's triumph. The Princeton Academic Committee had spoken, and the outcome was both swift and undeniable. Dr. Coleman's empire of lies had crumbled in an instant. His plagiarism, once shielded by his prestige and reputation, was now exposed for all to see. He was suspended from the university, and an investigation into his actions was officially launched. The walls he had carefully built around himself for decades had shattered, leaving nothing but his own arrogance and dishonesty to fall apart in the wake. For Marcus, however, the victory was far from simple. As he stood in the committee room, hearing the decision that would change his life forever, he realized that this was just the beginning of a much larger journey. The full scholarship offered to him wasn't just a personal reward. It was a symbol of something deeper. Marcus had proven not only that his intellect and self-determination could overcome the barriers built by an elitist system, but that systemic Change was possible if one had the courage to confront it head-on. A turning point in the system as Marcus left the committee room. The weight of the moment hit him. He was no longer just a student. He was a representative of something much larger. He was a beacon of hope for every marginalized person who'd been told they were not enough. For every student who had been rejected or overlooked because of their background, race, or financial status. His success was a challenge to the very foundations of the educational system that had tried to keep him out. But it wasn't just about Marcus. It was about the thousands of students who had been denied access to the same opportunities. The system was built to favor the privileged, to elevate those who had always had access to the best resources. Marcus's journey was a statement that this system, for all its power, could be dismantled. Not by force, but by sheer brilliance, resilience, and the courage to stand up for what was right. His victory was proof that genius could rise from any background, and talent could be nurtured by anyone willing to put in the work. In the days that followed, Marcus didn't rest. He didn't sit back and celebrate his success. He saw it as a turning point, a chance to give back. He worked tirelessly, not only as a student but also as a leader and a mentor. He established outreach programs, collaborating with MIN and other faculty members to create pathways for underrepresented students, those who, like him, had the potential to change the world but had never been given the chance. He knew that his victory didn't just belong to him, it belonged to everyone who had ever been underestimated, to every dreamer who had been told their dreams didn't matter. The ripple effect of one action. The effects of Marcus's fight for justice were far-reaching. His actions didn't just expose Dr. Coleman's wrongdoings. They sparked a wave of change within Princeton. Professors who had long turned a blind eye to the inequities in their departments began to reassess their approaches to teaching, to admissions, and to how they mentored students. Marcus's actions forced the institution to reckon with its own biases and inequities. But even more important than the academic reforms was the message Marcus sent to the world: that systemic injustice could be challenged, that merit could rise above privilege, and that integrity was worth fighting for, no matter the cost, the personal victory and the broader impact. As the weeks passed, Marcus found himself in a position he never imagined, standing before a class, delivering his first lecture as an assistant professor at the very university that had once rejected him. It wasn't just a victory for him. It was a victory for every student who had ever been told that their background made them less worthy of success. It was a victory for the students who had fought to belong, only to be told that they didn't meet the right criteria. Marcus's journey had proven that those very criteria were flawed, that true merit came from the courage to persevere, from the passion to question, and from the integrity to never back down. Marcus's story was not just one of personal achievement. It was a call to action for all those who had ever been marginalized, for anyone who had ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. It was a reminder that change didn't come from waiting for the system to fix itself. Change came from those who were brave enough to challenge it, to push against the walls of inequality and demand a seat at the table, the final lesson. And so, the lesson that Marcus's story imparts is a profound one. True genius and potential are not confined to those with the right connections, the right background, or the right skin color. They are found in the hearts and minds of those who are willing to fight for their place, who are willing to question the system, and who are unafraid to take risks for the sake of justice. Marcus's victory was a triumph of spirit, a testament to the power of self-belief, and a beacon for anyone who has ever felt overlooked or dismissed by society. Call to action. Marcus's journey was just the beginning of a much bigger movement. And now, it's your turn. We all have a role to play in challenging the systems that perpetuate inequality, in raising our voices against injustice, and in standing up for those who have been silenced. Don't wait for someone else to make the change. Be the change. If Marcus's story resonated with you, if it inspired you to stand up for what's right, then it's time to act. Subscribe to this channel to be part of a community that celebrates truth, justice, and the fight for equality. Like this video if you believe in the power of merit and integrity over privilege, and comment below. Share your thoughts, your experiences, and your own stories of fighting against the odds. The fight for justice is not over. Together, we can keep pushing for change, and together, we can make a difference.